Hey guys, Zane here with another One Take review, and today I wanted to talk about the Beth's new album, Expert in a Dying Field. Expert in a Dying Field is the latest studio album from indie pop rock band The Beths, and after their 2018 debut album, Future Me Hates Me, went on to become sort of a favorite of the indie scene, a bit of a classic at this point, even though it's only a few years old, and their 2020 sophomore album, Jump Rope Gazers, which was also well received though slightly less publicized, were both very just overall positively viewed and remain so to this day. A lot of people were expecting more from their third studio album. Admittedly, they did have a bit of a case of the sophomore slump with Jump Rope Gazers back in 2020. Not as many people paid attention to that. Like I said, it wasn't quite as publicized by a lot of different platforms that review music, whether it be YouTube channels or Pitchfork or something within that particular realm of just music criticism. But I really do feel like Expert in a Dying Field, their latest studio album, will immediately put them back to the forefront of indie music once again. First of all, quite simply, Expert in a Dying Field is just insanely catchy. I mean, if you want a record with a knack for hooks this year, then this is definitely one of the first picks that you should be checking out. I really do feel like, as strange as it might sound, that is a distinct characteristic about not only Dying Field, but also really any of the Beth's previous albums as well. Just a sort of distinct factor of memorability about them. There are a lot of indie rock and pop rock bands that take similar sounds to what the Beths are doing at the moment and just don't do anything particularly remarkable with them. They kind of sound like every other band that's kind of fighting their way through the indie circuit right now in a attempt to make it to at least semi-mainstream relevance, but the Beths are already at that semi-mainstream relevance, and that's largely because they just feel like a much more easy to listen to, less of a slog to get through kind of band than a lot of their peers do. Expert in a Dying Field is really genuinely filled with a lot of hooks and choruses and even verses that are just distinctly catchy and memorable and really stand out to the listener, even with a barrage of them being thrown at you song after song. And it leads to a record that is, without a doubt in my mind, one of the best pop rock albums that we've been served as listeners so far this year. Expert in a Dying Field is much more than just some solid hooks, though. In fact, it's genuinely impressive at times instrumentally, with guitarists Elizabeth Stokes and Jonathan Pierce delivering some of the best performances of their career thus far on this record in particular, and that's saying something considering their previous work in a variety of other projects that they've been behind has been equally as impressive. It's just that Expert in a Dying Field really just does amp them up a bit more and put them at the front of the band, perhaps more than they've ever been before. Expert in a Dying Field also continues the Beth's trend of taking very obvious influences but executing them well enough that they don't feel tired or overdone or even tacky at times. I mean, you can really hear everything from the jangly pop sounds of Teenage Fan Club to Belle and Sebastian on here, and all of it is very apparent. It really does round up into a sort of mixture of power pop, indie rock, pop rock, a lot of different sounds that really are intertwined and branch off from one another at a source of just pop music as a whole, but all of it works very well, and a lot of the songs here embrace a sound that has been done time and time again, but with enough fire and passion behind it that the Beths never sound like a repeat of things that you've heard before. They are a band well worth checking out if you've heard the previous acts, but even if you aren't familiar with them, then the Beths are still a great band in their own right. You don't need any sort of historical musical context to really understand this band and why they are good at what they do. Expert in a Dying Field is ridiculously consistent as well, and there are times, admittedly, where a violent consistency can be a bad thing, actually, as strange as that sounds, but if you have a consistently good record that at times one or two tracks maybe is great, it never becomes a great record, it just becomes a average album with a couple of songs that are just really, really good. But Expert in a Dying Field is consistently fantastic, not just a really good album, a genuinely outstanding record. And as such, this is the kind of listening experience that, while I do recommend sitting down and hearing from front to back just for the sake of being able to hear the entire album as it was meant to be listened to by the artists in question, it's also a record that can be easily listened to in chunks if you want to, without really any break or disconnect in the quality of the record or the listening experience overall. So overall, Expert in a Dying Field is another extremely impressive album from the Beths after a number of other singles and albums that have been consistently excellent. I genuinely believe that we are now at the point where I can firmly say that the Beths are one of the best acts in indie music at the moment of any kind. Whether they are able to maintain that consistency is yet to be seen, as really we are pretty not super far into their career overall, only a few years overall, less than 10. If it's less than 10 years, then let's face it, we can't really promise anything for an excellent career, but nonetheless, the Beths' releases so far, including Expert in a Dying Field, have been fairly brilliant, all things considered, and as such, I'm going to give this record 4.5 stars out of 5. My one take on this album is that Expert in a Dying Field is a brilliant slice of indie music from the Beths that marks a major highlight in the alternative scene for 2022, while also giving Future Me Hates Me a damn good run for its money. So again, 4.5 stars out of 5, and with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.